my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel. Also consider clicking the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. Also, if you are interested in a private reading, I do readings in astrology on a variety of topics ranging from relationship readings to career to transits for 2-3 years, or solar return charts or predictions for 1 year, etc. You are free to email me at the email address that I will leave in the video description, and I can send you a pricing list and reading options and any other details that you might require. Also, I want to mention that I have started membership options on this channel, and the short of it, just to give you the short perks that you will get if you choose to join the membership section, you will get 1 extra video per month for each membership stage or tier. So for the first tier, you will get 1 extra video per month. For the second tier, you will get 2 extra videos per month, so you will have access to level 1 and level 2 videos. And for level 3 or third tier, you will get 3 extra videos per month. The level 1 and level 3 videos are going to be on a variety of topics, so basically anything related to astrology, but it will be content that is not shown on my regular usual videos, right? So this is members only exclusive content, and it can range from, tips and tricks on how to read a horoscope to, I haven't done this yet, but I plan on doing maybe members only astrological synastry for famous couples, for instance, or the analysis of famous people's horoscopes, but then I can also get into divisional charts, etc., etc. So all kinds of things. The level 1 or second tier of membership options is especially related to synastry astrology topics, meaning relationship-oriented astrology. So this could be things like how to discover which kind of partner archetype is right for you according to your horoscope, or it could be, again, different characteristics, whether you're going to have a good marriage according to your horoscope or a less than stellar marriage. But you can find more concrete examples in the lists that you will find in the video description, because I have added the playlists where you can already see all the videos that I have posted in each members section. So yeah, you can see what videos you will have access to from the ones that I have already done. But I will continue to post, like I said, 1 extra video per month for each level of membership. And in addition to that, in the members only section, you will have access to members only polls, and you will also have priority when it comes to getting your comments replied to on my channel. And you will also have stickers that basically show up next to your username that show that you are a member, and a couple of exclusive emojis. All right, so that's pretty much all the perks that you can have as a member on my channel. If you're curious, you can check the video description for more details as well, or you can click the join button under any of my videos to also see the prices, because the prices will be shown in your local currency. All right, in addition to the members only section, I also have a tarot channel, and I post there semi-regularly, and I will be linking the tarot channel in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. It's called Martine's Tarot. So if you are curious about tarot, if you're into it, maybe check out my channel, maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to this intro. And now I'm going to get straight into today's topic. Hello and welcome to my channel. Welcome to another video from me. So today's topic is, as I have mentioned in the community post about Purva Bhadrapada and potential power struggles in different kinds of relationships. This is again based on empirical observation, things that I have noticed basically over more than at least a decade now of reading Vedic astrology charts, and I have noticed this pattern coming up time and time again of people with Purva Bhadrapada placements getting into power struggles. And as far as I have noticed, the main thing that I want to point out actually in this case is the fact that the planet that is sitting in Purva Bhadrapada is actually going to show the type of relationship or the type of people that you get into power struggles with. Of course, in addition to the housing placement, so the houses in the horoscope that this nakshatra is connected to, again, that will show more information about the type of person that you might get into power struggles with. So for instance, if you have Purva Bhadrapada planets in the 7th house, it can show that you will get into power struggles with your spouse or with people in general. So audiences, meaning you might become controversial if you get in a public position. I had to take a break, and now I'm back. So I was talking about how the different types of planets will show the different types of, well, planets or houses in a person's horoscope that are connected to Purva Bhadrapada tend to show what kind of relationships the person has power struggles in. And basically, again, this is going to be one of those videos where I'm not going to show famous people's horoscopes because there are so many examples that, it would take me forever and a day to show everything. And, it's based on empirical observation, as I've said, not just based on famous people's horoscopes, but also based on things that I've seen with people that I've known very well, and also a little bit of my own experience as well, because I also have some placements in Purva Bhadrapada, and I've just noticed this pattern, okay, like constant power struggles. And now Purva Bhadrapada in and of itself is a nakshatra that is very challenging. It's by nature a fierce nakshatra. It's one of the worst, basically, in terms of the kind of environment that it creates, in the sense that it puts the person through a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of struggles. But a lot of these sufferings and these struggles that I've seen are really connected to relationship dramas, right? Whether it's early childhood relationships, whether it's relationships with people down the line, oftentimes there is a lifelong pattern of struggles in certain types of relationships with this nakshatra. Just to give you some examples right off the top of my head of people that I have looked at, famous people over the years. For instance, well, one that I can think about right off the top of my head, probably very telling, is Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe had Mars in Purva Bhadrapada, and she obviously had a lot of power struggles with men in general. So Mars as an archetype shows, number one, men. It can be male peers, right? So whether it's men that you work with, or it can be brothers if you have them. And especially refers to men who are unmarried, men who are not fathers, especially. Not necessarily men who are unmarried, actually. It's men who are not fathers, because once a man becomes a father, then he is symbolized by the sun. But of course, in a woman's chart, even more importantly, Mars is the boyfriend / husband archetype, right? According to, I think it's called Nadi astrology, the Mars is actually the husband archetype. Now, according to more other schools of astrology or traditional Vedic astrology, Parashara and such, it's actually Jupiter that is the husband and Mars that is the boyfriend. But no matter how you look at it, right, Mars symbolizes male figures in a woman's life. So it would be sort of expected that a woman who has Mars in Purva Bhadrapada will get into power struggles, painful relationships, so on and so forth. I don't think I have to tell you that Marilyn Monroe was in abusive relationships. And as far as I have read and have seen in some documentaries, it was a lifelong problem, having been molested as a child. And as much as, she was an object of desire, or probably because of that, right? Because she was an object of desire, men liked her, but also hated her because they couldn't control her. And throughout her life, this has been, this was a pattern. Even though she actually ended up being quite independent and very strong-willed, and I think deep down she definitely was, if for no other reason, because she reached the level of success that she did with as little support as she did. It shows how intelligent and driven she was. But a lot of people nowadays don't know about the fact that she was the first female producer in Hollywood, the first actress actually who started her own production company in Hollywood. So she was definitely independent, and no doubt a lot of this was power struggles with men. I remember seeing a video about her life, a documentary where I don't know if it was a documentary or whatever. It was an interview with Tony Lee Curtis, I think that was his name, her co-star in Some Like It Hot, who knew her very well, I think had a fling with her or something like that, and talked about how deep down, and it wasn't just him, multiple people who knew her very well knew that she was a very angry person. And he spoke especially about how bitter and hateful she was towards a lot of the men that she had to have contact with, sometimes even had to sleep with, because she was growing up in that not growing up, but like getting up through that world of extreme misogyny, and also being a very attractive young woman without really any support or protection. So definitely a pattern, unfortunately, of lifelong struggles and lifelong power struggles, especially with male figures. Then there are countless examples that I can think about of people with moon in Purva Bhadrapada. For instance, I remember reading about Grace Kelly, an example, who, both her parents were kind of messed up, I think. But her mother in particular, so Grace Kelly had moon in Purva Bhadrapada, and her mother was physically abusive and very, very strict, as far as I've heard. Of course, there aren't many details about it. Let's not also forget that back in those days, people were a lot more hush-hush about what was going on behind closed doors and had that mentality of don't wash your dirty laundry in public. But the information is out there that, she had a very strained relationship with her mother. Some other people, let me think. Another one that I remember reading about was Machine Gun Kelly. I don't know if there were power struggles. It seemed like there was a difficult relationship with his mother. He also has moon in Purva Bhadrapada, by the way, in Pisces. So I think it's particularly bad with Aquarius. As you know, the first three padhas or subsections of Purva Bhadrapada fall in Aquarius. The last one falls in Pisces. I think it's particularly bad with Aquarius because Aquarius really has this connection to loss and emotional deprivation and emotional kind of a heaviness through absence, in a way. I have actually talked about this in a different video. I don't remember which one. It may have been a members only video, but I don't remember exactly. Talked about Aquarius and Scorpio and how they're kind of karmic signs, and how they might show suffering, especially in the navamsa, in relationships. Anyway, I digress. Aquarius, though, so in the Aquarius sections, the planets that are in Purva Bhadrapada in Aquarius are particularly strong, right? Strong in a negative sense. In some ways, there are positives. Of course, there's always a silver lining to every placement. So, usually with Aquarians, Purva Bhadrapada Aquarians, they're very original, especially if they get into artistry of any kind, or even if they get into science. Sometimes, they can be very original, very non-conforming, and they tend to see, or, they see things through a new point of view. They have something creative and original to add to the fields that they work in a lot of the times. That's if they don't fall down the path of, addictions and self-destructive behaviors of all kinds, as many people with traumas do. Another example that again I just remembered right off the top of my head again is Marilyn Manson, who has Venus in Purva Bhadrapada. So again, power struggles with the wife, power struggles with women in general, particularly women who are not mothers. Obviously, now I'm not saying he was innocent or anything. I'm not looking at whether he's innocent or not. I'm just simply showcasing the fact that he did get into power struggles very, very much, very intensely, I would say, very publicly with, I think it was an ex-wife, right? Wasn't Evan Rachel Wood his wife at some point? I don't remember. I don't know if if they ever got married, but they were definitely engaged, okay? So wife, girlfriend, right? Venus in a man's horoscope, that is wife, girlfriend archetype. And it could be women in general, so women who are not mothers. And there were a bunch of women who came forward and attacked him. Now, as far as I remember, speaking of Manson, I do remember reading an article about him that he had a book where he talked about how he was violent towards his mother or something. I don't know, like, there's some really disturbing stuff about him out there, and I think, obviously, whether he said this or not, I mean, kids are not just violent towards their parents for no reason. There's probably anger and resentment involved. And it's, not that I would say that Venus governs the mother in a horoscope, actually, but I think maybe there was some residual hatred towards his mother. Either way, whichever the motivation is, whichever the psychological mechanisms behind his actions were, the truth was he did end up in power struggles with women. Another example that I could find was Simone Biles. And again, I'm going to take this opportunity to also mention, as I have to strengthen the idea, as I mentioned initially, that this also refers to navamsa placements. So even if you have Purva Bhadrapada placements in the navamsa, it also stands true. It might become particularly prominent in the second half of life if you have placements in the navamsa. But as I have mentioned in my previous video that I just posted on my channel, I believe that placements in the navamsa are very much active throughout a person's life, even in the first half of life. So I would say placements in the navamsa definitely stand. And having that in view, another example is Simone Biles, who has Moon in Kritika in the D1 and Moon in Purva Bhadrapada in the D9. And just out of curiosity, I remember searching some information about her and her mother and what her views on her mother are. And apparently it came out that she was estranged from her mother, that her mother abandoned her as a child. And I think more recently tried to get back into her life, try to, rekindle the relationship with her daughter. And of course, she was not happy about that and basically did not want any contact. That was the last thing that I read. I don't know, maybe things have changed in the meantime, but again, it does sound like power struggles to me. You may think, well, that doesn't really sound like a power struggle, but any kind of abusive relationship, because again, especially when it comes to her case, I remember it was something about a man or something like, or that her mother blamed a boyfriend or her father for the fact that she abandoned her, something like that. Whatever it was, it looked like a back and forth situation and disappointment. And a similar situation is also found in the case of Machine Gun Kelly, who also has Moon in Purva Bhadrapada. Again, I remember reading some information, just Googling out of curiosity, and what he thinks about his mother or what his relationship to his mother is. And again, there was a theme of abandonment, right? Something about his mother left him because she wanted to be with her boyfriend or something, or that she just wasn't in his life. That was a general idea. Now, the navamsa can actually show more information about this, whether the relationship is going to get better after midlife eventually, if it has the potential of getting better, or sometimes if it gets worse. So when you have Purva Bhadrapada in the navamsa, as far as I have seen, relationships with those particular individuals tend to get worse over time. Or after marriage, especially because, again, of that theory that navamsa is particularly activated after you get married. Another example, let me think. There are loads of examples, like I said, tons of examples. Another one is a pretty big one is Rita Hayworth. So Rita Hayworth really, gosh, I remember seeing a documentary about her, and she really had a very sad life. She had a horribly abusive father figure, and in her horoscope, she actually has Sun in Libra in the seventh house, so that's a very debilitated Sun energy. And apparently, her father was number one obsessed with making her a famous dancer, and number two apparently had a very inappropriate relationship with her. Some people even say incestuous, and apparently her mother's main fault in all this was just the fact that she never protected her daughter, right? So her mother knew what was going on but never really stepped in. And Rita Hayworth had moon in Purva Bhadrapada. So moon in Purva Bhadrapada in, I think, Aquarius, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think it was Aquarius. Wait, or Pisces. Let me double check just to make sure. It was Pisces, yeah. So her moon was in Pisces. However, it doesn't make much of a difference in this case. As I said, usually with Pisces, as far as I've noticed, but again, I don't mean for this to turn into an in-depth video about Purva Bhadrapada. But with Pisces, as far as I've seen, a lot of Purva Bhadrapadas in Pisces tend to have somewhat of an easier path, simply because they can find an outlet in arts. So they're often talented and they follow creative expression, so they tend to find at least comfort in expressing themselves artistically and usually become successful like that as well. Whereas in Aquarius, the path is a lot more isolating and connected, like I said, to a lot of loss and a lot of suffering. Another example that I actually just looked into, because I remember knowing that he has moon in Purva Bhadrapada, so I just checked out of curiosity. Another one is Kanye West, and it's interesting because I do remember seeing bits and pieces of interviews with him where he was praising his mother, and I'm gonna make a parenthesis over here, which maybe is going to seem controversial, but a lot of the times people who grow up in abusive environments, especially if they never get conscious, right? If they're never conscious of what happened to them, they actually might get stuck in that situation where they're defending the abuser. And I mean, all children to some extent develop this. Okay, you can do a little bit of research on your own, and you will see what I'm talking about. The general theory in psychotherapy, for instance, is that if a child grows up being being abused or in an abusive family, their first reaction is to develop a kind of Stockholm syndrome where they side with the abuser, right? Because children biologically are not capable of surviving on their own. And because of that, their instincts are geared towards appeasing the parental figures, even if the parental figures are severely messed up. So a lot of the times you actually see people who never grow out of this, right? Never practice any kind of self-analysis or self-awareness, right? They don't go through therapy, and nobody ever points out the fact that, hey, wait a minute, your parents were not sane. A lot of them actually publicly will say, oh, I love my parents. My parents were great, And in fact, I would tend to be suspicious of anyone who seems very intent on defending their parents, right? Saying how wonderful the parent was. And then over time, right, as they started to become more self-aware, they might start to reveal bits and pieces of things that actually show that the parent was not as great as they initially portrayed, right? Or sometimes it's just memories coming back, especially once the parent has left the picture for some reason, they go no contact for some reason, or the parent literally has passed away, which has happened in Kanye West's case. They start to have flashbacks, right, of memories that they have repressed and things that actually bothered them, but they did not allow themselves to think about those things while the parent was still close to them, because it would have been too painful to deal with it. So, ending the parenthesis for the time being, Kanye West was one of these cases, in my opinion at least, because I remember, like I said, this interview where he was really praising his mother, and just seemed like he was praising her way too much, like disproportionately how wonderful she was and blah blah blah. And according to some accounts, he actually even became severely depressed once she passed away, which again does not necessarily show how wonderful she was, if you ask me. It just shows he may have been codependent with his mother, but again, closing another parenthesis. What has shown in recent history apparently was that he had some weird slip-ups on social media where he talked about how his mother was secretly a lesbian and made out with other women, or no, made out with his nanny or something like that, which again kind of hints towards the fact that his mother may have not been that great, and may have done things that were potentially traumatizing for a small child to see, even a teenager to see, really, or to witness, okay, even if he hasn't actually seen anything. Apparently, there was some tweet that he made some years ago where he said that he heard noises from his mother's room and knew that she was there with a nanny or something, like whatever, right? And I've also mentioned this in another video, by the way. I think it was the one where I talked about abusive childhoods, bad childhoods, and stuff like that. I talked about how oftentimes, because Purva Bhadrapada is symbolized by the two-faced man, you will oftentimes see cases of people with these placements, especially if they're connected to the mother or father archetype, such as the sun or the moon, or the lords of the 4th, 9th, or 10th houses in the horoscope, that they have these parental figures who are two-faced in some way. So they have a secret side that often is dormant for years, right? Or maybe the child knows about it, but nobody on the outside knows about it. So they are forced to keep it hush-hush, right, in public. And that obviously leads to other problems for a child's development, right? Because you're not supposed to be the emotional caretaker of your parents or their secrets, really. And so they're two-faced, and the two-facedness thing, it can take a whole range of expressions, from the most benign to, things like, again, your mother being secretly lesbian, which I don't think is a small thing, right? Especially if she started doing inappropriate stuff under the same roof as her son. And another example that, again, I just checked out of curiosity because I remembered again that he had moon in Purva Bhadrapada in Pisces, and I'm probably going to get really dark with this one. Gosh, this video is really taking more turns than I had anticipated. As you can tell, I don't have a plan. I just want to give as many examples as possible, and at the end I'm going to get to the general expressions of different planets in Purva Bhadrapada and what kind of power struggles you can expect with them. So this example is Richard Ramirez, infamous serial killer. I think he was active in, I don't know, the 90s, or it was older than that. Let me see. Oh no, it was way before the 90s. I think it was 80s or not. I don't know. It was somewhere along those lines. Either way, he was given the capital punishment eventually, but it was a while ago. So he had a pattern of murdering and essaying women in horrible scenarios. I think, as far as I've read, something like bondage stuff, which again sounds like very power struggle sort of problem, right? And again, Purva Bhadrapadas can have these kinds of weird, dark sexual things with them. I've talked about this in the video where I talked about the Jupiter ruled nakshatras, that this nakshatra is kind of connected to all kinds of deviant behaviors. Although, if you ask me, I tend to have a more practical approach to astrology in the sense that I look at it as a constant cause and effect situation. So I would not necessarily say that Purva Bhadrapada in and of itself creates sexual deviance. I think it creates an environment that is extremely troubled and extremely abusive, really, very harsh for the individual that has these placements. So out of that, they might develop all kinds of deviant behaviors, especially if the rest of the horoscope points in that direction. So, in Ramirez's case, I do remember I've talked about this guy before, but I don't remember. I think it was a video where I talked about serial killers, yeah. Anyway, and I actually also mentioned in that video that unfortunately Purva Bhadrapada does tend to show up quite a bit. I haven't done like any extensive statistics to see just how often it shows up, but as I've also said, I think it would be really difficult to do statistics because you would have to check the navamsa horoscopes as well. They're equally important, really. So anyway, but I have talked about him before, and I have mentioned in that horoscope that quite a few serial killers and people who are troubled tend to have quite a bit of these placements. People who are troubled and abusive, right? So anyway, Richard Ramirez is one of these examples, and what I could find from the online environment is that he had a very abusive father figure. So he was in the US, he was the son of immigrants, and his father was very physically abusive, and his mother, again, was the type that just didn't do anything to stop it. And apparently he was exposed to a lot of violence early on. I think he had family, cousins, uncles, or something like that, who were in the military, talked about, all kinds of violent things. And also, there are multiple things in his horoscope that would show, an interest in violence and all these things. So I'm saying this to say that not everyone who has Purva Bhadrapada placements is a potential serial killer. You have to look at, again, the whole horoscope and what general trends are in there, and to understand how this person functions when it comes to their values and their psyche and all that. And in his case, anyway, he had Mercury in Purva Bhadrapada and Moon in Purva Bhadrapada, so conjunct together in Pisces. And what is also, I think, a tipping point in his case is the fact that the Moon and the Mercury conjunction is also conjunct Ketu. So that would make his mind particularly fascinated maybe with death as well. So Moon and Ketu tends to be very, very kind of in their own world. And again, not trying to say that everyone who has this conjunction is going to be a serial killer, but in his case, there are a lot of things in his horoscope that point towards violence. Not least of which is the fact that he also has Mars conjunct Venus, which tends to show a love of violence, and conjunct Saturn, which would further emphasize things like getting into power plays and all this stuff, and actually enjoying those sort of things, especially with the Saturn connection to the Mars, because Mars and Venus, these are planets that show how a person's sexuality tends to express. So anyway, tends to express itself. Anyway, the fact that he has this, right, and like as I was saying, what I looked into is the fact that his mother was just not defending. And what I'm going to open another psychology related parenthesis, and you see this a lot with killers, really, and it surprises me that nobody looks into this, but to me it's pretty obvious that the reason why they target women, a lot of them, and you see this, I'm pretty sure you see this with Ted Bundy as well. The reason I say this is because with Ted Bundy, he also said his family didn't do anything. But again, I don't want to open too much of a parenthesis because I could talk about this for hours and hours. But this is my opinion, at least intuitively and based on reading his horoscope, Ted Bundy, I mean, that he actually hated his mother. But there was a lot of suppressed or repressed emotion and a lot of repressed anger that turned out, that really took this insane expression, in addition to, of course, other things in his horoscope that showed a tendency towards violence and all that. And if I remember correctly, he also had Ketu influencing the moon, or influencing the mother archetype, either the fourth house or the moon. And again, the reason this is important is because when Ketu is conjunct the moon, and I've talked about this with men who have, I don't know, did I do a separate video actually about this? I do remember talking about it. Men with mommy issues or men with mother issues. I did talk about men with daddy issues, definitely, but I don't know if I did a separate video about men with mommy issues. I will try to look for all the related videos and I will link them in the video description. But I'm gonna say it right now, even if I didn't do a video. So just as the things that I have mentioned in that video where I talked about men with daddy issues, a similar thing happens with the mother archetype. So where you have a lot of Ketu connected to the mother archetypes, it shows that the mother was somehow emotionally distant, absent, not affectionate. Basically, the worst case scenario, well, actually not the worst case scenario for others as we see in these cases. But again, I digress too much. But yeah, worst case scenario, okay, for the individual would be a mother that passed away when the child was very young. And you see that, right, with moon conjunct Ketu, or even Ketu aspected by the moon sometimes, right? So somehow when Ketu is aspecting the mother archetype, that means that the child did not have a mother figure because the mother was somehow absent, either physically or emotionally. And in his case, as far as I have read, it's the second scenario. His mother was married to his father. His father was horribly abusive towards him and his siblings, and the mother was not interfering. So she was physically there, but then she was emotionally absent. Also was not affectionate, was distant, which would make sense in a scenario like that, where the woman is stuck in an abusive relationship. She has no way of getting out. Generally, women start to check out in those situations, right? And I think in this case, just as in the Ted Bundy case, that actually translated into him developing a lot of hatred towards his mother because he perceived his mother as not interested or not caring enough towards him to save him out of that situation, right? That's why you see the anger directed. And of course, in addition to the obvious, which is that, well, I guess it's physically easier to become abusive towards women because men are just physically stronger. But I think in addition, it was, the mother issues showing up here. Actually, now that I looked a little bit further into it, it turns out that he wasn't just targeting women. Apparently, he had all kinds of victims, actually, even children and elderly people. That's really messed up. So, yeah, he was considered to be one of the worst cases of serial killers in the history, well, in recorded history, and I guess in the history of the US. And he was difficult to kill, apparently, precisely because he targeted different types of people. He didn't seem to have a quote type, but there was also a long string of essays against women in particular, in addition to the murders and whatnot. So either way, his horoscope, though, it does show this power struggles. See, here's the thing that's interesting, because the moon and Mercury both are in Purva Bhadrapada, and even with the Ketu conjunction, I wouldn't be surprised. I know that this is far-fetched and there is no record of this, but I wouldn't be surprised if he actually was under some kind of influence, some kind of unnatural influence, if you know what I mean, because Purva Bhadrapada is connected to black magic. And apparently, according to records, he actually spoke of Satanism. He spoke of rituals and all this stuff. And if he actually dabbled into this and actually conjured something, it wouldn't be excluded that he actually was possessed with something, especially with that Ketu being conjunct the moon and Mercury as well. Because again, Ketu has to deal with spiritual possession. Well, not necessarily just spiritual possession, but anything that has to deal with the spirit world is very Ketu dominant. And yeah, but Mercury would also show power struggles with younger people, peers, siblings, and yeah, younger people as well. He also, interestingly, or well, if you can say it interestingly, let me see actually. Yeah, he also has this cluster, well, this conjunction of Mercury Moon being aspected by. Actually, no, it's not aspect. I was going to say it's aspected by Saturn, but it's not. And it's falling into his fifth house. So this Moon Mercury conjunction in Purva Bhadrapada and Ketu, right? Moon Mercury Ketu. This is conjunct in the fifth house, which is the house of fun. So this is what he loved to do. Not only is it the house of what you find fun, but it's the house of romance as well. So what stimulates you romantically, which is really disturbing the more you think about it. In addition to a lot of other things, like I said, that he has going on in his horoscope. And this is only the D1 chart, right? This is without even looking at the navamsa. I'm sure that the patterns are continuing. And the ascendant of his ascendant in the D1 is a Scorpio in Jyotish Nakshatra. So again, that would add to a dark, obsessive nature. Also, this tendency towards violence as well. Yeah, anyway, this is pretty much what I have to say about him. This is like the darkest example that I could think about. A lighter example. See, the way that I've looked into this now is, so I've just randomly searched some people that I know have Purva Bhadrapada placements, and I specifically targeted, certain types of people. Like, have they had any power struggles or conflicts with something symbolized by that planet that is sitting in Purva Bhadrapada? So another really fun example, fun, quote unquote, is Ridley Scott. The reason I know about Ridley Scott's horoscope is because I am a geek for a lot of his stuff, basically, the Alien series, and I think he also produced The King, didn't he? He has a lot of good films anyway, but especially the Alien series, that was my favorite thing. He also produced that TV series that was kind of inspired, in a way, not entirely the same plot, but inspired by the same themes as Alien, which was called Raised by Wolves. So anyway, I'm kind of a fan. So I know that he has Saturn in Purva Bhadrapada, so just out of sheer curiosity, I looked for whether he had some kind of conflict with any politicians or governments, or because Saturn is authorities to some extent, and more specifically, it's about governments, right? So legislation, legal problems, and stuff like that. So apparently there was some kind of controversy with him and Malta, which is really random. Apparently he said something. Oh, he also filmed Gladiator or something like that, or he was involved in the production of Gladiator. Oh, Gladiator 2. Of course, that makes sense. Because the first one was a long time ago. So apparently he had a negative encounter with the Maltese government because he made some comment about visiting Malta again or something. Yeah, he was perceived to be disrespectful, got into some kind of an issue, after which the government asked him to apologize or something. Government officials were pissed off, basically. Because he said he wouldn't recommend Malta as a holiday destination or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, this is an example. Okay, it's a very small, random example, but I would say it still counts. So, Saturn, again, would show government, authority, stuff like that, the people who are making the legislation. It can also show people who are in a lower socio-economic class than you, technically, because Saturn shows servants, traditionally in Vedic astrology. Another more light example is Rachel Weisz. And again, this is totally random because I remember, again, her saying in an interview, not so much about her father. And I think if you ask me, it's probably because, you know, she's part of a culture and an age range and a certain group, right, of people where, again, washing your dirty laundry in public is not acceptable. So I think even if she has had some issues with her father, she wouldn't be public about it. But what is interesting is that in an interview, she talked about how she has a problem with authority, which I was going to get to this, actually goes hand in hand with having a problem with the father figure, right? And this is backed up by psychology. You see all of these statistics that show, you know, if you have a bad father figure or if you have an absent father figure, but especially if you have a bad father figure, if you ask me, if anything, again, I'm opening another parenthesis, but, you know, I know that the misogynists of the world love to talk about how negative it is for a child to not have a father figure. And there were some statistics in the US that talked about how many men who end up in prison don't have a father figure and that many of them don't and stuff like that. But I wonder if they also did any statistic, and of course they didn't, because it would not really serve their case to do this kind of a statistic. But I'm sure that if someone were to do a statistic, a bad father figure would be almost as likely to land someone in prison as a absent father figure, or even worse, actually. Because if you look at if you look at mafia documentaries or these people who become involved in gangster activities, many of them were introduced to the lifestyle by their own fathers. So it's hilarious to me that, you know, men only focus on how bad it is for a child, a male child in particular, to not have a father figure in their lives. But it's, I think, like I said, intuitively and based on the evidence, I think it's just as bad, if not worse, to have a negative father figure. So with Purva Bhadrapada, this is where I was getting at. I've actually tried to look for famous people. I couldn't find any, but I can tell you, okay, not show you, I can tell you. I've looked at a lot of horoscopes with people who have Sun in Purva Bhadrapada, and many of them have messed up father figures. And again, there is a degree, there is a range, and of course a lot depends on what else is going on in the horoscope, and a lot depends on what the sun is doing in the navamsa. Because if you have, let's say, Sun in Purva Bhadrapada in the D1, but in the navamsa it gets into a more gentle nakshatra, like let's say it's in Uttara Bhadrapada, right? Or something lighter, something healthier for the sun, basically. Then it would kind of show a softening up still, or like the father figure deep down is actually not a bad guy, something like that, right? But if you look at the D1 and the sun is in Purva Bhadrapada, and then in the D9 the sun is in some other savage nakshatra, right, like Ardra, or even Kritika to some extent, right? These nakshatras that are connected to warfare, aggression, and all this, you kind of already can tell a picture that this person did not have a healthy father figure, right? And especially with the sun in Purva Bhadrapada, because of this connection between father figures and authority figures, the person tends to have conflict. So once they have a conflict with the father figure, the conflict with authoritative figures is kind of a natural conclusion, right? It's a natural development in this person's life, especially, again, if you see it in the D1, it may not be, right, it might show especially in the first half of the person's life, and as they cool down, or maybe their sun transits into a nicer nakshatra in the D9, they start to become more understanding and, you know, they tone down their ego. And it's also interesting to me in this interview, because I distinctly remember that she said she used to have a very serious problem with authority figures when she was a child, but that later she started feeling more and more accepting, especially once she got into acting and had to listen to directors and all that. So that would make sense. I haven't checked her horoscope, but chances are extremely slim that she also has her sun in Purva Bhadrapada in the D9 as well. So it would make sense that, you know, having sun in Purva Bhadrapada in the D1 would show these power struggles particularly prominent in the first half of life. So anyway, but like I said, so I've tried to look for famous people. I couldn't really find, so please let me know if you know of any famous people with Sun in Purva Bhadrapada. It would be interesting to note the kind of relationship they have with their father figures. And yeah, this is pretty much what I can think about. I mean, I'm sure, like I said, there are countless examples that I could give you on and on and on about potential struggles. So just to give you the walkthrough for each planet in Purva Bhadrapada and what kind of power struggles they invite really throughout life. So again, with the Sun in Purva Bhadrapada, the main power struggles are with the father figure, or it could be father figures in general. So men who are fathers, right? You might get into power struggles with them. Like, for instance, you could see that at work, you get into arguments with these kinds of individuals more than others. It could be, of course, bosses, any kind of authority figure throughout life, right, can show a power struggle. It could come from you or it could come from them, you know. Because if you ask me, again, people like to think of this as fatalistic, and I won't open this topic here. I might do a separate video about how a lot of stuff in astrology is labeled as fatalistic, but it's really just a consequence of the environment that you grew up in. So the astrological horoscope mainly shows the kind of environment that you grow up in and, you know, the hands that you are dealt, right? So a lot of these psychological developments that astrologers look at, and they say, you know, when they look at someone's horoscope and they say, oh, this person has, you know, sun in this nakshatra, it means they're going to be this, this, and this. That's actually the way that they have developed in response to their environment, not really some kind of fatalistic thing, not like as if you were just meant to develop exactly this behavioral problem when you were 36 years old, right? Anyway, but I digress. This is for a whole different video. The bottom line is Sun in Purva Bhadrapada, conflicts with authority figures, father figure, bosses, so on. Moon in Purva Bhadrapada, again, conflicts with mother figures, conflicts with power struggles, conflicts with women who are mothers in general, your own mother figure. It could also be Cancer is connected to professions, connected to nurturing. So it could be conflict, power struggles with nurses, cooks even, you know, anyone who works in some kind of environment where they're nurturing, people who work with fluids, right? People who work in maritime anything, I don't know, maritime travels, export, import, that kind of thing. You could get into power struggles with Amazon or something with this placement. Mercury in Purva Bhadrapada can be power struggles with younger people who are younger than you are. Also peers. So I have actually, just out of curiosity, I've tried to look for people who have this placement, but I couldn't find anyone. However, just intuitively, based on what I know about this nakshatra and Mercury, I would say this would definitely tend to show issues with peers, you know, bullying at school, especially early on in life when that Mercury is really active in the first part of your life, because it's connected to education and children and all that. So I would expect bullying from other children could be a possibility, or you becoming a bully towards, or, you know, having this kind of back and forth power struggle thing with other children, especially early on in life. It could also be, to some extent, a power struggle with your own kids, right? Because, again, anyone who's younger than you could fall into that Mercury energy. But especially people who are youthful, right, in nature. So youthful means, let's say, until roughly the age of 20, technically, with Mercury. Although it's stretching out nowadays because a lot of young people stay young and immature for a long time. Not judging. Another thing with Mercury could be people in business, anyone involved in communications, right? Someone who communicates a lot on a regular basis for their profession. That could be a source of a power struggle. Writers, for instance, accountants, journalists. So anyone who communicates a lot on a regular basis. People who are also working with details a lot. Aside from that, Venus in Purva Bhadrapada, so I have talked about this a little bit in the examples. Definitely the wife archetype. So if you're a man and you have Venus in Purva Bhadrapada, it is possible that you are going to get into power struggles with your wife slash girlfriend, and women who are not mothers, right? So in addition to that, Venus can also be the beauty industry. So again, if you are a woman and you have this Venus in Purva Bhadrapada, you could run into really bad hairdressers who want to ruin your hair without even realizing it, or they ruin your hair without, like I said, without realizing it. It might be hard for you to find a decent hairdresser or someone who is a good cosmetologist or something, right? Because they might get into power struggles with you, or they might be jealous of you or something like that. And also Venus rules anything that is kind of, I guess, not existential, but is only done for fun. So could be arts, could be, so artists, for instance, power struggles with artists with Purva Bhadrapada. It could be, again, women who are not mothers. So again, that's a broad net. Of course, it doesn't mean that you're going to have struggles with everyone from these categories, but you can expect a few, right? And it can be female peers as well. If you have a sister, this could be your sister as well, especially if the sister doesn't have children. Once the sister has children, she's more likely to be ruled by the moon. Anyone who's also directly working with money, people in banking, people in finance, salespeople as well. So anyone who works with money a lot, right? Transactions and whatnot. Sweets, the sweets industry, again, people who are cake makers, that could be a power struggle. Yeah, so anything that is basically, Venus is all about sugar, spice, and everything nice. So even hobbies, right? Venus is also about what you love. So hobbies, fashion, again, fashion industry. Would be interesting to see models who have Venus in Purva Bhadrapada and how they handle the world of fashion, because I could only imagine that it's a constant game of backstabbing. Aside from that, if you have Mars in Purva Bhadrapada, again, have covered this with the first example, it could show that you will have power struggles with men, male peers, brothers, if you have them. It can be, so male peers, again, could be people at work as well, especially men who don't have children, because once a man has children, he is symbolized by the sun, not Mars. Can also be anyone involved in Mars-dominated professions, male-dominated professions, the military, police, defense of any kind, any job that is particularly physical, right? Physical trainers, athletes, people who are doing a lot of sports on a regular basis, anyone who's involved with weapons, engineering, especially engineering that has to deal with hands-on things, mechanical engineering, also electrical engineering to some extent, although with those you would have to see other influences. Anything that is purely mechanical is definitely Mars. Real estate, that's another one. You could get into power struggles with real estate agents or, owners of property. Also, Mars is vehicles, so again, you might have a hard time getting into conflicts with people who want to sell you a car, or power struggles. Also, any person who works with head-related things, so whether this is most likely a physical thing, okay, so with Mars, or using the muscles, bodybuilders, so anything that uses muscles a lot, bodybuilders, like I said, or any kind of athlete, or again, connected to the head, could be neurosurgeon, could be dentist, could be eye doctor, nose doctor, throat not so much, ear doctor as well. So yeah, people like that who are, have some kind of line of work where they're working with the head or something, that could be a source of power struggle. And ironically, I'm going to make a parenthesis here. Now that I think about Marilyn Monroe, there was a very significant rumor, coming from people who were close to her, that actually the man who may have really contributed to her death in her final moments was her psychotherapist. So now that I think about it, that would definitely add something to the story. And again, it would go hand in hand with her horoscope. Anyway, Jupiter in Purva Bhadrapada conflicts with religious figures. Could be religious people in general, but with Jupiter, it's especially religious leaders, right? You could really rub them the wrong way. You might say something inappropriate that pisses them off. Also, any kind of guru, teacher, right? So with Jupiter and Purva Bhadrapada, I would not be surprised to see conflicts with teachers, with professors, even early on in life. And by the way, all of these, they apply to both the D1 and the D9 chart, like I said. So, yeah, religious people, teachers, professors later on. So anyone who's in a teaching position, really, that's Jupiter. Philosophers, people who have to deal with high level learning, even authors. So Jupiter is the publishing business. So if you're an author with Jupiter and Purva Bhadrapada, have fun. It would be interesting to look at this because, again, I would expect a person like this to run into quite a few naysayers and people who want to put them down or get into actual conflicts, right, about royalties and whatnot. Jupiter, to some extent, is also people from foreign lands, but not the biggest indicator. Rahu is a lot more like that. Another big one with Jupiter is actually animals. So this is gonna sound weird, but again, would be interesting to look into this. It's kind of difficult to get information about it, but again, just based on intuition and based on what I know from astrology, you would expect to see this. I don't know, running into animals that bite you or knock you down, or I don't know, getting into dangerous situations with animals, maybe unprovoked. Or provoking without realizing, that could be a thing. Another thing with Jupiter is anyone involved in natural sciences, right? So even doctors, biologists, so anyone who's involved with living organisms, people who work with living organisms or about life itself. I think that's about it. Those are the major. Another one would be the legal system to some extent, but that would be more Saturn, actually. To some extent, it could be with Jupiter, but it's mostly Saturn. So that's pretty much it. Saturn in Purva Bhadrapada now. Main conflicts, again, talked about Ridley Scott a little bit in the examples. But with with Saturn in Purva Bhadrapada, the main conflicts can be with the legal system, the legislation of a country, the government, right? So you could run into problems with the tax people. That would be an obvious thing. Also getting into power struggles with people who symbolize the tradition of a country. So anything that rules tradition is Saturn. The legal system, like I said, I keep seeing the legal system, but yeah, the laws, actually the laws. So everything that is rigid rules, right? The rule makers of a country or of an organization. That's another one. Also, Saturn can be professions connected to rocks and minerals, archaeologists, paleontologists, anyone connected to history, another one, historians, bone doctors, another one, because like minerals and rocks in the body, teeth doctors, dentists, geologists, yeah, you name it. So anything connected to rocks, to bones, to minerals, either in the body or outside of the body, right? So Saturn is about everything that lasts, pretty much. Also older people in general. So Saturn is older people. You could get into power struggles with older people. Mostly Saturn rules actually old people, as in nowadays I would say in most countries that's 65 plus. Sorry for it causing offense to anyone, but I think officially that's pretty much how it would be labeled. Let's say if you're a senior citizen, it's 65 plus, I think, in most places. Let's say we can stretch it to 70 plus. So mostly Saturn is connected to actual old people, but it's also people who are older than you. So just about anyone who's older than you could be a potential enemy in disguise. Don't want to make you paranoid. Of course, a lot depends on what else is going on in the horoscope. And then, of course, in addition to when these things get activated, it's through dashas, antardashas, transits, etc. Aside from that, Saturn is... So I have mentioned archaeology, history, and all that. Also, servants. That's another big one. In traditional Vedic astrology, Saturn is servants. So again, if you're hiring a cleaning lady, if you are, hiring a cook, anyone who's working for you, right, providing a service, especially work that is not particularly intellectual, that what some people would call, let's say, menial work. These people are ruled by Saturn. So again, if you are blessed, quote unquote, with this placement, you might have some of those cases where you run into conflicts with the cleaning lady. I don't know, she starts stealing from you or something. Heaven forbid. Or something like that, right? You might get into some kind of issues. Aside from that, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much what I can say about Saturn. So Rahu in Purva Bhadrapada. Obviously, the main source of power struggles are going to be people from foreign origin, right? Foreign countries, from a totally different culture. With Rahu, ironically, it can also be anyone who is not mainstream, including, potentially, people who are into astrology to some extent. Obviously, again, not trying to say that everyone who is going to be an astrologer is going to be, I don't know, getting into conflicts with you, but you might come across a few, right? Or it can be people who, not just astrologers, right? Because Rahu is a bunch of stuff. Anyone in technology, that's another one. In STEM fields, right? Anyone working in STEM fields, that could be a potential source of power struggle. So again, if you have this placement and you want to work in, I don't know, genetic engineering, you might run into quite a few power struggles along the way, especially if you have coworkers coming from foreign origins. Rahu also shows people working in pharmaceuticals, in the drug industry. And I don't mean illegal necessarily. Of course, it also covers the illegal. Actually, Rahu covers pretty much anything that is illegal. So be careful. Don't borrow money with from the mafia. Sorry, with this placement. Not a good idea. So any illegal activities can actually also be seen as Rahu. But aside from that, so I was saying the drug industry, right? So pharmaceuticals, chemistry, those things are ruled by Rahu. To some extent, poisons, okay? People working with poison. So if you ever run into someone who is collecting snake venom for a living, they might turn out to be your enemy. Or you might have, again, power struggles doesn't automatically mean enemy for life. But again, you might run into some conflicts, right? Usually power struggle means they have something against you, you have something against them, right? You basically see each other as rivals and you're vying for who has the upper hand. So, yeah, that could happen. Also, people who are connected to anything foreign. And I know this is pretty broad. This is why I say you have to look at also what else is going on in the horoscope. And as, of course, I have mentioned, it doesn't mean that automatically everyone from these categories is going to be an enemy or something. But another one with Rahu could be people who are, let's say, teaching foreign languages, right? Or maybe people who are somehow in a strong way defined through connections to foreign lands. So I don't know, ambassadors, for instance. You know, these people nowadays who make a living on YouTube because they moved to a foreign country and they talk about their lives in the foreign. That would be an example of a Rahuvian sort of person. Like someone who has completely adopted a different nationality, a different country, etc., right? Ketu in Purva Bhadrapada. This is a big one, as I have mentioned a little bit in the examples as well with Ramirez. Actually, I don't think Ramirez, or did he? Let me double check that. Actually, yes. He also had Ketu in Purva Bhadrapada. So, obviously, not trying to say that everyone who has this is going to be a serial killer, but with Purva Bhadrapada Ketu, this is really important. Definitely do not meddle with anything supernatural. So don't think that it's fun to start conjuring things. You know, yeah, not a good idea at all. So with this one, you can actually get into serious trouble when it comes to black magic and all this stuff. So conflicts could be with spiritual realms, literally, or it could be conflicts with spiritual people to some extent. Ketu can also rule electricians, or people working with small electronics, which nowadays a lot of people are. Basically, a laptop is a small electronic, or people who need a laptop to work, right? That could be a Ketu dominant person from your perspective, not because their horoscope shows that, right? Ketu, right, is electronics, can also be dogs and fish. People who work with dogs and fish or love dogs and fish. I should have mentioned this also with Rahu, it's cats. So, people who love cats or they're cat people, those are Rahuvians. Anyway, Ketu, right? So, aside from electricians, electricity, people who work with cabling, especially with connections, like tracing, connectivities, networking, stuff like that, that's Ketu. But honestly, the main thing that I would say with Ketu is the supernatural here. So, and I know some people don't believe in it, and unfortunately, those are the people who end up foaming at the mouth and talking in ancient tongues after they conjured some shit they found in their grandmother's basement. From a book they found in their grandmother's basement, I mean. But anyway, with Ketu, it's definitely, so Ketu can also be dead bodies, people who have passed, right? So deceased. But it's mostly spiritual things. So yeah, stay away from things. I'm not trying to say don't meditate or something, but don't get into any kind of witchcraft, try to conjure or anything like that. Not a good idea with this placement. Okay, this is pretty much what I can say. This video, again, has turned out to be much longer than I anticipated. But I guess it makes sense because, as I have mentioned in the beginning, it is it is a topic for which I could find a lot of examples. Eventually I started finding quite a few examples that I mentioned in the video. But I haven't had time to, go super in-depth with their horoscopes. So this will have to do for now. But you can easily look for their horoscopes. You can check the placements yourself. So, yeah, this is pretty much. And I hope you have enjoyed it as usual. And of course, feel free to comment in the comment section. I'm very curious about this one. To which extent it resonates, whether you know people that it resonates for. Of course, if it doesn't resonate completely, and maybe give some examples of how it doesn't resonate. But also, as I have mentioned, and I will mention it again, it's very important to look at both the D1 and the D9 horoscopes and see what the situation is there. So if you have a planet in Purva Bhadrapada in the D1, also check to see what's going on in the D9 and vice versa. So yeah, this has been pretty much it. Also, again, if you have found this information useful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel, click on the notifications bell to see when I will post a new video. And in addition to that, if you are interested in a private consultation, I do consultations on a wide variety of topics. I will leave my email address in the video description so you can email me for a pricing list, reading options, any other details you're interested in. Aside from that, I have also made an introductory section to this video where I talked about the membership section of my channel. And if you're curious about it, I've already posted a lot of videos in those membership sections, so you can check the playlists. You can actually check them on my latest community post, because I've posted the playlist there with all the videos that I have uploaded in my membership only section. But if you want to find out more details about it, you can check out the introductory part of this video where I talk about memberships. You can also click on the join button under any of my videos to see the prices in the local currency. Aside from that, last but not least, I also have a tarot channel, which I will be linking in the video description as well. And if you're curious about tarot, go ahead and check it out. Maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you at my next video.